is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved in second for approval of the agenda. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Boyle. Mr. Hoffman is absent. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Seeley?
Here, yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mr. Woodbolt?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Boyle?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Approved.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Very good, thank you. Moving on to recognitions, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, I think we're going to start with Mr. Williams. He's got kind of a treat for us to start the board meeting with.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
So this evening, I'd like to recognize Senior Lily Kuhn. Sorry, didn't know you were right behind me. Lily is one of the approximately 16,000 semifinalists named nationwide as part of the annual National Merit Scholarship Academic Competition. Students were selected based on scores on the PSAT qualifying test. The nationwide pool of semifinalists represents less than 1% of U.S. high school seniors and includes the highest scoring entrants in each state. These seniors must submit a scholarship application that includes an outstanding academic record, a recommendation from their school, an essay, and SAT scores that confirm the results of the PSAT. National Merit Scholarship winners of 2021 will be announced in 4 nationwide news releases beginning in April, concluding in July. And I would also like to add, with her ACT super score, she got a perfect 36 on the ACT. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Lily Kuhn.
Congratulations, Lily.
Well done, Lily.
So can you still go on to, is that the farthest you go, or they evaluate all the semifinalists for the final?
Finalists and then
No.
the final.
I think Sharon would know all about that as well, right?
I don't.
The next one up, Mr. Gersten has kind of another treat.
Excited to present Miss Molly Dugan to you tonight. Miss Molly Dugan is this year's Horizon Award winner, which is an award for excellence for first-year teachers. Molly is a 7th and 8th grade ELA teacher force at Spring Hill Middle School. One of the things that continues to impress us about Molly is not only her ability to teach, but also the ability to connect with students and show leadership at a very, very young age. And so she's not intimidated by much. She's willing to get up and embrace all challenges that come her way. And we've seen that in the ability to, again, not only connect with kids, but also show her leadership within our curriculum department, within our professional learning community. So we're so proud of Miss Dugan and the work she does for our students, and how she continues to be a shining example of leadership and excellence in education at Spring Hill Middle School.
Thank you. Let's see the teacher here.
And Ms. Dugan there's an application that she'll fill out and turn that into the state, and she could be a state-recognized Horizon Award winner as well. So we're very excited for that.
Congratulations.
And then the third treat, well, first of all, these are all treats, but this is a third treat. We're going to have Mrs. Cole come up, and do you want to visit with us about what you've got going on? Or do you want us to make the announcement, or? Go ahead, come on up here.
Okay, I'm not great on the fly, but I'm really excited about the staff in terms of Prairie Creek Elementary School Blue Ribbon Award. It's a national award. There are 131,000 schools across the United States, and they selected 267, and Prairie Creek was one of those. So I have the great pleasure every morning to work with phenomenal teachers who do amazing things. And I wish it wasn't parent-teacher conferences, because they're the ones that need to be standing here because they do the hard work every day. So I'm just really proud of them.
That's a big deal, guys.
Yeah.
Well done, Sarah, great.
Didn't they see that there was only 6 in the state of Kansas?
I believe that's correct. I think that we were one of 6
Very
in the
nice.
whole state.
Congratulations.
So with that, now we'll go to regular recognitions, and Mrs. Cole, you're first.
Hey, good evening. I would like to recognize our school nurse, Melissa Moritz. She hits the ground running every morning with temperature checks, following up with parents, checking on sick students, dealing with COVID-related issues, giving out daily medications, updating records, and assisting staff any way she can. I don't know what we would do without her, and I can't thank her enough for her compassion, dedication, and expertise. I'd also like to give a shout out to the classroom teachers for the time and work they have devoted to preparing for parent-teacher conferences this week. Thanks.
Tammy Endicott, is she on, Zoom?
Yes, I am. Hi, good evening. I also wanted to recognize a few people. I mean, I have a lot of leaders in my building, but I have a few people who recently have just helped me manage every single day. And that is also my school nurse, Adrienne Barrett, who, as we've worked through this COVID situations and different things that have come up, it's just so nice to be able to work together and know that it's just a collaborative process, and it just takes a lot off of me as a principal. And so I really appreciate her. And then also my school secretaries, Amy Belcher and Sharon Dvorak, they just take a lot of work off of me right now that this whirlwind that we keep facing and everything keeps changing daily, it seems like. Those are 3 people who are just very supportive of me and taking a lot of workload off me. So I appreciate all 3 of them.
Wolf Creek Elementary School, Beth Cooper.
Good evening, everybody. It seems like we have a little bit of a theme in our elementary presentations tonight. I also had made note that I want to recognize Sandy Lancelotti and Christy Weber. Those are our 2 Wolf Creek Elementary School secretaries. And just like everyone, they have taken on a lot of additional tasks in this current school year. And it started way back in the summer when we had some, extra challenges with our enrollment and keeping track of who was going where and helping families answer those questions and that kind of thing. They have extra tasks with dismissal this year. Both of my secretaries are taking on some lunch duties this year, and they even maybe go so far as to do a little wildlife remediation that may have involved a snake last week. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but whatever it is, they do cheerfully and they do it meticulously, and it helps us really keep our school running smoothly and also keeps all of our children and staff safe. So I wanted to thank and recognize them tonight.
All right, Timber Sage Elementary School, Darcy Sly.
Well, good evening. Tonight, I'd like to recognize Abby Robertson. She's our school counselor. She's done an amazing job so far this year, helping me out with the students that are needing extra help. And then also, she's gotten our Stuco elections going. We are going to go ahead and have Stuco this year, even with COVID. She's helped kids hang up posters as they've come in. She's helped video kids as they give their speeches and helping them with those things as well. And then putting them all together for our students to view, and putting together the voting form for us through Google so that all of the kids are getting to see that virtually. And we're also including our ORL students with that as well. So our ORL students that are in grades 3 through 5 are getting to vote and run for offices. And so one way that we're trying to include those students in our school throughout all of this COVID stuff. So I really appreciate all the hard work that she's put into that, and wanted to recognize her tonight. Thank you.
I believe Woodland Spring Middle School, Rodney Sprague.
So good evening. I'd like to recognize Jolene Rutledge. At the beginning of this year, one of the things I challenged my leadership team with was we still have to keep academic progress and keep students moving forward academically at the forefront of what we do. And Jolene has been incredibly vigilant in that process with me. sometimes keeping me focused, going, okay, we've been focusing a lot on management issues, let's focus on students. She's helped coordinate our MAP assessments. She's helping coordinate the analysis with the data on our MAP assessments and helping give our teachers feedback and input on what we need to be working on and helping teachers develop those interventions. So she's done a phenomenal job, and I think our teachers will often say, I create a lot of stress, and Jolene kind of comes in and calms it down a little bit. She's been an incredible resource for our teachers, so we're really proud of her. Also, just want to thank all of our fall coaches. We're finishing up our fall seasons. Had an incredibly successful volleyball season. Football season's been going very well. And then we're coming into basketball seasons for the girls and wrestling season for the boys. So great seasons. It was fun to see all the kids compete and learn and grow and develop as they did. So thank you.
Spring Hill Middle School, Trevor Gertson.
All right, I want to start by recognizing our custodial department, the great work they do. They've taken on an extreme task this year of keeping the building clean, not only when there's kids in the building now, but also just throughout the evening. And so we have a great team with Lloyd Gallagher, with Bill, Lauren, and Brittany, and Walt. And so they all work in conjunction with the support of Kylie each and every day to make sure our building is clean. And also, as Rod said, we did have a great fall sports season. I know that's something a lot of our kids are really excited about this year, and so it's good to be able to see them out there competing, not only with our cheer, our volleyball, football, and cross country. And so very, very proud of the work they've done with our kids.
Spring Hill High School, Mark Williams.
Good evening. I would like this evening to recognize Lori Brunkner. Lori is our school nurse at the high school. Being a school nurse during COVID is not a job I would want at all, but Lori is a true professional and handles everything with the utmost profession and dignity. She relates well with our students, is compassionate with our parents, and she keeps me very calm during some of these times with that. So she's a true hard worker, and it's been a pleasure to be with Lori throughout this. I'd also like to recognize our three counselors, Deb Wifter, Kimberly Devine, and Kitty George. They've worked extremely hard. And then when we opened back up ORL for students, they had some schedule adjustments they needed to work with some kids and meet the needs of those, and they put in a lot of long hours and communication with parents. They did a tremendous job. Thank you.
And then we have other. Is there any administrators, anybody that wants to recognize somebody? Mr. Elliott?
Yes. I would like to recognize the media center specialists in the middle schools and the high school, Amy Berman at Woodland Spring, Rebecca Cheek at Spring Hill Middle School, and Rebecca Fawcett at Spring Hill High School. During the remote learning, they were a key component for our ability to help support the kids that were at home. They really went above and beyond and kind of helped us be that liaison between those homes and what we could do to help support them. So just want to recognize them. Clay Freegon also at the high school jumped in and did quite a bit as well. So, but those individuals really helped us be able to help the kids, and so they were critical for us. Thank you.
Any other administrators? With that, we're done with recognition. Mr. Updike.
Very good, thank you, and congratulations to everyone. It's one of my favorite parts of these meetings is to hear just the accolades that we can give people, the very positive things that are going on, even in times that aren't exactly predictable. We always know that we have the performance of our students, staff, administrators, teachers. We can count on them to find what's positive and find the opportunities and continue to celebrate what's positive. So I appreciate that, and it's always great to hear. Moving on to business with individuals, we do have one card, Mike Arnold. Before you start, just know that our process is that all problems and concerns are most effectively dealt with at the lowest level possible. In most cases, that's a teacher or the building principal. And that's where we should start. That's where patrons and parents should begin, by expressing their concerns directly with either the teacher or the overall building administrator. That's the first thing. The second is that the board president does maintain control over the floor and sets a time limit not to exceed 5 minutes. for your presentation or your discussion. Also know that according to board policy and procedure, the board will not hear personnel complaints concerning any employee or group of employees. All of those issues are handled and referred to district administration, who then reports to the board in executive session. With that, I invite you up to the podium and know that you have a 5-minute time limit.
My question specifically asks what the school board has done in terms of looking at the seriousness of the pandemic and why we are bringing our children back in light of it for face-to-face learning. Kansas, Missouri, surrounding states have seen increases of COVID cases on a daily basis, to include hospitalizations and to include deaths. It was our model so weak and full of holes that we were not able to take and provide an education to them without subjecting them to the disease by face-to-face and close proximity with other children and the teachers as well, and thus take that disease home to elderly and families, so on and so forth. What exists here that makes us so special that we think we can turn our head the other way and not be affected by it? What medical evidence did we use to say, oh, it's going to be okay, let's go ahead, have the children come back to school? What safeguards have we given our custodians, office staff, and teachers, coaches, and so on, that has to come in contact with every single one of these children on a daily basis, that they're not going to take and catch this disease? Is it necessary that we can only provide education face-to-face? Department of Defense has been using long-distance learning for decades, quite successfully. Why is it that their model can't be used to take and apply learning for our children? What medical evidence did we use? And who provided it? It's a question, gentlemen and lady.
Well, the board does not have to respond, but just a quick overview. We have hundreds of hours of research, education, development, review, study. We've developed a very comprehensive return to school plan. We have a gating criteria that's been established using Center for Disease Control, World Health Organization, medical professionals, immunologists, infectious disease control specialists. So we've done a lot of due diligence, hundreds and hundreds of hours. That's the response I would provide. Does the board have any other responses?
We have that kind of expertise on our board?
No, that's why we solicited various outside professionals to do that.
Is the public eligible to receive that information as to who we use and what they had to say?
All of that information is available on our website.
Mr. Dyke, I would just add that maybe we could redirect to our past board meeting as well with the state of Kansas epidemiologist, the Johnson County epidemiologist, a medical doctor, the pediatrician that is with the COVID Kansas task force. All of those people advised us last week as well. And it's a really great board meeting for anybody. It's out there to review at any time as well.
All of that information is available on our district website. If you have any questions, there is a process to work through our website to ask any question you may have. Our district administration will provide answers to any questions you have.
The name of this meeting of the medical professionals is when and where?
It's in the past. It happened at our last board meeting. If you can listen to our entire board meeting on YouTube. The last 3 or 4 board meetings have been virtually dedicated to working through a resolution for this.
So we've done all this and decided that it's okay.
Our conclusions are posted on the district website. Do you have anything else to say?
What is your plan if we end up with multiple cases of COVID in our schools?
It's all covered in our return to school, our return plan on our district website.
Is there a plan to take and close the schools if it gets out of hand?
You can review the plan on the website. If you have questions on that plan, you're asking questions that are all covered comprehensively within that plan. I would refer you to the district website to review that plan. And if you have questions, you're certainly welcome to bring those questions up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. No other public participation cards are on my desk. Moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes of the September 28th morning meeting, approval of the minutes of the special meeting of September 28th, approval of minutes of special meeting held on October 5th, personnel and early graduation requests. Any questions on the consent agenda? Discussions or comments on the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the consent agenda.
This is Ally, I second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further or final discussion? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
approved.
Moving on to action items. 7.01, move remaining morning board meeting this semester. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, as you remember, we talked at the last board meeting about moving the morning meeting to Hilltop, and we are making an adjustment to asking to have that meeting moved to 7 p.m. On that meeting, we do need some additional time that we're not going to be able to have in the morning. So with this, we are asking to move that meeting to Hilltop location and the time changing to 7 p.m. With that, we'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Discussion?
Mr. President, I move that the board would move the October 26th originally scheduled morning meeting to Hilltop Education Center and to change the time to 7 p.m.
Second.
This is Ally, I second.
It's moved and seconded to move the remaining morning board meeting this semester, as noted. Any final discussion? Questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you.
Before we leave this topic,
Uh-huh.
Candy, I will not be at that meeting.
Okay.
Moving on to action item 7.02, memorandum of understanding for RG Fiber. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, actually, for our community, we've got some really good news. So Phil, do you want to talk to them about RG Fiber?
You bet. So, I do have Eric with RG Fiber on the call if we have any specific questions, but let me kind of give you the 20,000-foot overview here. The part of the federal stimulus money, the CARES Act money, the state developed some Spark grants that RG Fiber applied for. We did have several conversations with them during the application process, and I did submit a letter of support. They did a really great job identifying the need in our community, and many of you may have received the survey that they sent out to kind of gauge what people's bandwidth and speeds are. And they were awarded that. The official press release is pending basically this MOU. They are going to provide within, and I'm drawing a blank to the distance that's in the MOU, within a distance of their built-out network, they will be providing free service for those who qualify for free reduced lunches. I'm sorry, for free lunches, and a reduced fee for those that would qualify for reduced. This will be fiber to the person's home, and they are providing. We'll be partnering with them as well as part of the path that comes to town to help get Dayton Creek online as well. So be happy to answer any questions. The timeline of this is pretty short. The state of Kansas promised that they would be ready to pull the trigger on this mid-September. You can tell where we are now, and they're just now getting everything together. The problem is this money has to be spent by December 30th or 31st. And so the timeline's pretty tight. They're gearing up and ready to start putting fiber in the ground.
I have a question on term. When it says at the end of the following school year, does that mean this school year that we're currently in, or 21-22 school year?
So it would be the current year, because the network is supposed to have to be built by the end of the year, and then they will renew for the next year based on their company's vote.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is for the entire town of Spring Hill, or just certain?
It will be where their network gets built out, so it won't be everywhere at once, but as they build out, then the eligibility will go with it, yes. And Eric, if you've got anything to add, just feel free to jump in.
Phil, there's no cost to the school district, is there?
Correct, there's no cost. The component that we will be participating in is the parents will have to request us to send a letter to them confirming that they qualify for free reduced. That's the way the federal free reduced lunch program requires it to. So we will, JC and her staff will be part of that process.
We've run this by Greg Goheen, and he's fine with it.
I don't know whether it matters or not, but I would like to just disclose that I did also write a letter of support for their project on behalf of the Spring Hill Chamber.
I also wrote a letter of support to RG Fiber and other companies on behalf of my company as well.
I didn't know you snuck in behind me. So Mike Bosch with RG Fiber, I didn't know you.
Yeah, I thought that was Mike, and you were referring to him, and I'm like, I think that's him.
Good evening.
Eric.
Yeah, you got Eric on Zoom. I had another engagement that ended early, so I was able to be out. I'm Mike Bosch. I'm the founder and CEO of RG Fiber. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a program that we've run out in Baldwin City School District and the DeSoto School District. Essentially, as we're building out our network as part of the Spark funding and the matching grants that our private investors have invested alongside the grant money, we want to make sure that those families who need internet but can't quite afford it throughout the school district are able to get that. So what this MOU is representing is that program. This program will survive long past the grant funding and the build out. So that term is just for the school year. And then we reevaluate. We'll touch base with everybody and say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what tweaks do we need to make? Are there new areas that we need to build out as the school district continues to grow? And then we'll renew that, and there is an auto-renew clause in that agreement. So this is just, there's no cost associated with the school district. We think it's the right thing to do. These families will get all the equipment necessary, including whole home Wi-Fi. And they'll have symmetrical 150 megabits up and down provided for free or for $30 a month from RG Fiber. So I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up about RG Fiber, this program, or our Spark funded project as well. And thank you for everybody who supported us with the letters and the speed truth tests.
What's kind of your plans on through Spring Hill? Is it just hitting certain areas this year and then the rest of it next year? Or there like a 5-year plan, or what's the?
So we were pretty aggressive with the Spark proposal that we provided. We're going to build about 25 miles between now and the end of the year. We are currently, we have materials inbound, we have contractors on standby. We're waiting for a final go-ahead from the city on a permit. They have all the documentation. I was supposed to see something today or hopefully tomorrow. And then we can probably get started as early as next week at this point. It'll probably get pushed to next week, unfortunately, instead of this week. But we're going to build out, again, 25 miles. It'll cover approximately 32% of the Spring Hill city limits. We'll have a map that'll come out fairly soon that shows us passing by several newer neighborhoods that have been built up, and we plan to continue the build out long after the end of the year. But just because of the nature of the CARES clause that says everything has to be built out by 12/30, we had to cut it off somewhere and say, this is what we'll do under that Spark funding. But then, like we've done in Baldwin and DeSoto, we'll continue to build out with our existing crews.
We're excited about this opportunity to work with Mr. Bosch. One of the things that our community talked about for a few years now is internet access that's reliable, that all of our families can get. So we're very, very excited to have this opportunity. This is an action item. We normally try to bring it to you early and then give you 2 weeks to wait on it. But in this case, the timeliness, when he said the end of the year, they have to have the funds spent by the 30th, 31st. And so we felt like 2 weeks delay would not be beneficial. It's not costing the district anything financially, and it's good for our kids. So with that, we recommend that we sign the MOU.
Mr. President, I move we approve the memorandum of understanding with RG Fiber.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the memorandum of understanding with RG Fiber. Any final questions or discussion?
I just wanted to add one comment. I just wanted to thank Mr. Bosch and his company. We've tried to do something for several years, and this Spark money was a great opportunity for us. So his commitment and his interest and his willingness to participate with us is very much appreciated. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Any final comments or discussion? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
A very enthusiastic yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to discussion items. 8.01, board policies. Dr. Burke?
I know the board loves that we bring policies to you. This is one of the main functions that you have. Usually we bring these to you in July or August, and then you don't see them again until July. However, a couple things have come up that we felt like we needed to, and Greg Goheen visited with us and felt like that we should get that. One thing, KDCA, Misty Etchison and I have been working for a few years now to try to protect the integrity of our logo and our mascots. And it's not as easy to trademark a mascot. And so one of the things that we did want to do is have something in our policy that talks about the use of our district name or a logo. You can read, so I'm not going to read this policy to you. But basically, it is not our intention to shut down our PTOs. It's not our intention that, that little small business person in our community. But what it is number one, it gives us some power and some control over whether somebody puts our name next to something inappropriate on a shirt. And then the other thing is, there are some situations where people could financially benefit greatly from using our logos and our mascots. And so we have been talking to Greg Goheen. A lot of our original mascots, they belong to us, so that's not an issue. The names of the schools belong to us. But the Spring Hill High School, the rearing Bronco is actually in a lot of mascots. If you go into books, it's called the Mustang, and that is universal, so that's not owned by anybody. So, if we put that mascot with Spring Hill High School, then we can kind of control that, but we can't control the likeness of that mascot. So with that, we felt like we needed to have some kind of policy in place that would kind of protect our interest in that. Some other districts have had some issues where people have taken their school name, put their mascot on it, and then put some inappropriate language underneath. So we want to be able to protect ourselves from that. The second policy, this actually came up, if you go down to the third paragraph on the relations with district personnel, students, parents, patrons, and vendors. If you remember, there was a big change in the Supreme Court on sexual harassment and what that all means. And so one of the things that Greg actually brought this to us is that we should make sure that our board members understand that there's an expectation of their appropriate and professional relationships. And then as we were originally just going to have this and talk about the appropriate communications and interactions, he felt that there ought to be something more encompassing of the district. So with that, he put together policy BL that talks about the relations of district personnel, students, parents, patrons, and vendors. So with that, we'll answer any questions for these two. I'm not going to try to read these to you. You can all read, but if you have any questions, we'll certainly answer those questions.
So does this talks at the first that it is about all these people, then by the time it gets down to the bottom, it just talks about students, so I wasn't sure what.
Well, I think
guess you did say it applies to staff.
Right, I think you're talking about, the way it was set up is, it's relations, and so you basically have four different areas. One is appropriate professional relationships. One is appropriate boundaries and communication interactions. There is one that concerns that to board members should be taken to us. And then last one, that this is one of the things that Greg is concerned about, that a lot of our policies are written as students and staff, but those same policies are governed, the board is governed by those same policies. And so more than anything else, he just wanted you to understand that there's not a great separation, even though that you're not paid staff, you do fall under those same policies.
Any questions or discussion on policy BL or KDCA?
So on KDCA, I guess my question is, how would that be enforced? And is it something that you look at enforcing? And because my question is that something the superintendent wants to be handling with all the schools and stuff all the time?
Or designate.
Or
Superintendent
designate.
or designate. So there's going to be some that's going to get to my level, and at that point, yeah, I probably need to be involved. There's some other things that PTOs can certainly sit down and visit with their principal and kind of talk about some fundraisers. We do a lot of T-shirts in the community, and I certainly don't want to get in the middle of that. That's, they're making a little bit of money for their school, and I think that's great. I want that to continue. But the other thing is we are looking at maybe some larger contracts where we're working with some companies that would maybe actually start putting our wear in somewhere like Walmart. I mean, if you go over to Gardner and you go into the Walmart or the Price Chopper, there's clothes in there that say Gardner on them. You go to Walmart by Blue Valley, you see schools that say, right now, we're not getting any of those. If that was to be at any of those companies, we're not getting any direct funding for that. If it's our name and our likeness, we probably ought to be getting something out of that. So there's a difference between the local person that's working with the school and PTO and trying to do something, and then something more corporate. So that's why we put superintendent or designate.
Do you think that there's already things kind of going on right now that would fall under that or not?
Possibly.
Okay.
I don't think we're talking about a large scale, but I think there could be some things that if we decide to sign this exclusivity contract with a company, then they would be the ones that would help enforce it. But we need to go through this step before we can talk to you guys about an exclusivity contract. And again, any exclusivity contract would be on a much larger scale than just the, local businesses working with the PTOs for shirts. We still want the PTOs to make sure that they're going through their administrator, make sure that they're signing off on it. But again, a lot of times those T-shirts are just being made to make a little bit of money as a, I say PTOs, but it could be some of our athletic teams or our activities, different things like that. We don't want to get in the way of that. We're talking more of a larger scale.
Any other questions or discussion on policies BL or policy KDCA?
On this, policy BL, I guess, to me, it seems pretty vague. So are there certain policies that maybe we should refer to at the bottom? Because it says, the board members shall maintain appropriate professional relationship with district personnel. And then it says, with district policies, procedures, handbooks, and goals. I mean, are there specific ones or just kind of, is this supposed to be just a, go ahead.
Third paragraph would reference AC. That was the one that we just did not too long ago. But yeah, we probably need to, while this isn't meant to be all-inclusive, we probably can go ahead and designate a few, yes.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm doing things right.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or discussion on the policies, BL or KDCA? Okay, we'll bring those back at our next stated meeting for, as action items. Moving on to, discussion item 8.02, the reopening plan. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, part of the reopening plan is the optional remote learning plan. And when the gating criteria and the reopening plan was put together, we asked parents that are in the optional remote to stay for a whole semester. And but at the same time, we said that we would look at that and reevaluate that. We've had quite a few parents, at least at the elementary level, and a few at the secondary level that have asked to have their kids come back to in-person. With that, we've asked them to stay. Number one is we did our staffing based on those students not being in the building, and then we created our optional remote learning plan based on them staying there for the year. So if those students start coming back piecemeal, then that means those class sizes start changing, and so for the parents who didn't change that, that affects them quite a bit. But also with the optional remote, we said that we would evaluate that after first semester and look and decide if we were going to do it second semester. So in looking at the evaluation of that, some concerns have been coming up, and we felt like we needed to share those concerns. There have been some positives, and you'll hear about the positives as well, but we would like to share some concerns with you. So I'm going to start by asking Jody Cole to give you her perspective of optional remote learning from an elementary principal perspective.
Could I just ask a quick question before she starts?
Sure.
Wasn't the optional remote learning something that the state mandated that we offer or not?
It's not mandated. They ask us to do it in the, I just went blank on what it's called, the plan that was put up at KSDE, the Navigating Change Plan. But no, it is not a requirement. And there are some districts in the state that did not do optional remote learning.
All right. COVID has forced us to get out of our comfort zone and try new things. Some have worked well, and some continue to be a work in progress. One of those new things we've been asked to talk about tonight is optional remote learning. Now that we have had several weeks of teaching in this format, I would like to share with you a positive and some areas that are still a work in progress. For some students, remote learning is a good fit as they are self-motivated and it matches their independent learning style. At the beginning of the year, teachers were spending a lot of time managing technology with students and parents. Recently, most students are able to log in and navigate technology in a timely manner. Building positive relationships is an important part of a student's success in the classroom. On-site students have opportunities throughout the entire school day to talk with other kids and their teachers. These daily conversations help build connections for positive student and teacher relationships. Optional remote teachers aren't able to provide as many of those opportunities for conversations. Oftentimes, teachers can base a lesson's success off of a student's reaction, participation, or excitement during the lesson. With optional remote learning, it is harder for students and teachers to have personal interactions. At the elementary level, we are still teaching our students how to manage their emotions, focus, and organize and plan their work in a timely fashion. We have discovered this is very difficult to do in a virtual setting. We have discovered it takes optional remote teachers twice as long to plan and build each lesson. Some also feel they are getting behind their on-site peers. Principals are instructional leaders, but due to the additional management of optional remote learning, we have found instructional leadership has taken a back seat, even though we are working most evenings and weekends. We have learned a lot and have grown as teachers and principals, but we are not convinced it is the best learning environment for the majority of our students, nor is it sustainable.
Mr. Gertson, you want to talk to us from a secondary perspective?
Yes, thank you. And I'll echo very much of what Mrs. Cole said as far as the overall benefits to the kids. There are many kids that this is a great, and I should come back and say that I don't know if I said many kids. There are some kids that this is a great situation for, but what we're finding is the vast majority of our kids are thriving back in the building and being with their teachers. One of the great challenges we do have with middle school and high school students is they need that connectivity and ability to interact with their like peers and interact with their teachers. One of the challenges we have staff-wise is the significant challenge of attention that is divided when you are trying to teach multiple kids at the same time. Teachers are masters of that within the actual classroom. But what we're now asking our staff to do is to divide that between those that are in the classroom and those that are in a virtual environment. And that's becoming quite a task for us. The image I have up here actually I think is a great image, and I picked it for a reason. It's Taylor Woodward. She's teaching 8th grade algebra right now. What you can't necessarily see is she has 3 different devices that she's currently working off of, and this is even before she has her in-class kids with her. And so kind of imagine, if you will, a teacher with kids in her classroom as well as in a virtual environment trying to support each one of those. It's a significantly divided attempt for that teacher. We have amazing teachers. We have amazing support. We have amazing technology. All of those things are in place. Yet even with that, we are finding it very, very difficult to devote our full attention to the kids we have. You can only devote your attention to one thing at one time. And so even for us as administrators, for our support staff, our counselors, our front office, the amount of hours that we are devoting to both groups is extensive. We are giving our best, and I have utmost confidence that our staff will continue to be the very, very best they can be. But I do, as Ms. Cole said as well, wonder how long can we maintain the intensity of trying to serve the best of our ability, both our virtual students as well as our in-person students. If you go on to the next slide there, you can see the variety of people that are involved in the work that we're doing. And so not only administrators, but also librarians, the instructional coaches, front office, ORL supervisors, technology liaisons. There's a lot of people that are involved in serving our ORL students. As I said, they are giving an absolute great effort and providing a really, really high quality service for those kids. But at the same time, they're also trying to provide that for the other in-person students, parents, and community members. And so in the same way that Ms. Cole had said, we're giving everything we got for it, but we feel like it is not something that we'll be able to sustain or maintain moving forward.
Ask Mrs. Jalda to come talk to you from a special education director.
Good evening. Mr. Elliott, will you advance the slides, please? Oh, one more, because I think we had possible other speaker. Okay. All right. I'm going to talk to you, as you are well aware this evening, our obligations that we've had for state and federal programs are those requirements for SPED or special education and our special programs. They've never changed. They've still stayed intact through all of COVID. The areas I'm going to talk about are often areas of challenge in SPED and with special services. They would be a challenge during a general year or a regular year with or without COVID. They would be. It just seems that COVID has seemed to intensify things. In talking to my daughter, we kind of talked about things, and she'd said, you know, COVID makes everything stronger. It makes emotions stronger. It makes fears stronger. It makes opinions stronger. And for us, it's made some of these areas just a little bit stronger. It's made kind of brought them out, brought them to light a little bit more. One area that we know, and I'm going to say because of the quality of the staff that we have, our special education staff and the staff that work, they're meeting these challenges, and they're doing a wonderful job in meeting these challenges. However, they don't, you know, we hold high expectations, and they hold high expectations, and they don't always feel that they're doing the best job that we aspire to. Sometimes they feel like we're just not where we want to be, that we're not doing that. So that's kind of a, you know, something to note with that. One area is scheduling. When we look at, and I think you kind of have an idea how this is set up, is that each school has maybe a grade level at the elementary level where they are serving an optional remote learning grade level. So the example on the screen, you see a kindergarten optional remote learning schedule on the right-hand side. It's a beautiful schedule. It does a really nice job with that, covers the needs of that. On the left, you see a schedule for one of the buildings of the kindergarten classes there. Our SPED students are served by their building. So if you were a SPED student at Wolf Creek, your case manager or SPED teacher would be at Wolf Creek. However, your optional remote learning teacher may be at another school. So with that being said, kind of that example, it just creates challenges of the schedules. You have your building schedule that SPED teacher is working with or those therapists are working with. You also have the optional remote learning schedule, which could be very different. Both serve their purposes. You just have that, you're trying to work within about 3 different schedules there. Another area working on, and you can go back if you'd like, please, Phil, thank you, is communication. Because we're working across buildings, we just have that added ability, we have to communicate. Sometimes we don't have common plan times. Sometimes there's instances where paras or the teachers that they're working with maybe haven't even met that optional remote teacher because they're in another building. So that just enhances that ability of that communication. That's a challenge. Sometimes our staff are doing double duty. In our low incidence classrooms, those are our classrooms like life skills at the high school, the middle school, elementary school. Those teachers, because of their licensure, we might have some autism students or some students who are served for behavior. Those teachers are required to spend the majority of their time working with their on-site students, but they may have optional remote students who they are also working with at the same time. I was at the high school, watched Mary Larson. You know, in theory, this should work. I watched Mary Larson, and she was doing a lesson, and let me tell you, it did work. And she's an outstanding teacher, and I watched her. She had a lesson on the board. She had students in her Zoom, which was on her computer at her desk. She had kiddos out in their classroom, and she was teaching, and she was keeping all of them engaged. And it was interesting to watch because she's at her computer. And I know as a principal, when I did walkthroughs, I never wanted teachers at their desk because I was like, that's the worst way to teach. You need to be out with kids. There she was at her desk. She was managing it with some really challenged learners, keeping them engaged, keeping her class engaged. They were all interacting. It was awesome. And it was great to watch, but it just made me think, boy, I bet she's tired. She was doing 2 entirely different things, 2 entirely different jobs, and managing it beautifully. And that was just for one portion of her day. And I know her entire day looks like that. That's a challenge for a lot of our SPED staff. They do double duty with that. We've tried to look at some ways of lessening that. We've tried to even look at finding some supports of some additional people. And I'll tell you, there aren't candidates out there right now. They're just not there. They're not there to find the people to do that. So that's a challenge. Another challenge that we have is the quality of services. Some of our services just don't translate well into that virtual environment. Some of our services we provide through SPED are hands-on types of services. Our physical therapies, our occupational therapies. Again, I've seen some beautiful lessons I've sat in on and watched our OTs and PTs do with students. If they had some good support at home, some things were really, really wonderful. But we've also been able to have the ability to bring some students back on site, which has been helpful. But regardless, it's just a challenge. It's a challenging area for us. Another area that we look at is the least restrictive environment. We want to make sure that our kids are in what is the least restrictive environment, or most often with their gen ed peers, or as closely as they can be. A parent in a regular classroom during a regular time may walk around, assist students, go from student to student, maybe pull somebody back quietly and talk to them or help them with an assignment. In a virtual classroom, that looks a lot different. You don't have the ability to just move from student to student when a virtual lesson is going on. It's a challenge. The parent oftentimes has to pull a student back into what we call a breakout room and kind of work with them, which is great, and it's a wonderful way to do that, but it's a more restrictive environment because they're just working with that student. They don't have the ability to kind of whisper in their ear in the middle of the lesson or help them out a little bit here in the middle of the lesson. They have to wait till the end because they can't pull them out of that virtual lesson. So just kind of some concerns. We're creating situations where our kids aren't always being able to be the most with their gen ed peers. The last area that we always look at is disparity, that disparity of caseloads. We've done some moving around to help out. There are situations where we may have some really challenging things in an optional remote environment where a SPED teacher has had to really redo a whole schedule or really work intently with a student. We've had the ability to move some caseloads around. That means some of their peers in their building are taking on a few more of their students, so they're freed up to have the time to do that. Some of those special classrooms that I noted, they don't have that ability to move their caseloads around. So again, that's just a challenge. We want to, there's some disparity there. Oftentimes there's more work than their gen ed counterparts because of that. There's just more things that need to be accomplished because of that. Essentially, when we are fully in or fully out, we are better able through SPED to meet these challenges. We have the better ability to focus and be able to do that. It does create a challenge when we're going between two environments, trying to do one or two at the same time just because of these issues. And as I stated previously, these challenges are always there. They're always there every year, even in any kind of environment. But like everything that I've said, everything with COVID just seems to become stronger. And we've kind of had some more emphasis with that. And those are just some perspectives of that. So I stand for any questions.
We have a couple of teachers, so we'd like to get the teachers on here, and then you can ask us any or all questions that you have. So Sadie Clements, I believe, is teaching first grade. And Sadie, are you on there?
I'm here. Hello. Wanted to introduce myself, Sadie Clements. I am Spring Hill Elementary. I teach first grade. I've taught there. This is my third year of first grade teaching, first year of optional remote. And I just wanted to share kind of how it's going. And I wanted to share my professional choice. I did apply for the optional remote position. It was something that I applied for that I was interested in. Candidly, very uncomfortable with COVID, not a fan. So I was more comfortable for the optional remote as a professional because I knew this year was going to be a challenge. I knew that educating in a pandemic was going to be unlike anything I've ever done in my 9 years of teaching. And I was looking forward to choosing a challenge that I felt I could pick, I could learn, I could bring things back when, we get back into a regular swing of things, and it would make me a better teacher. So that was my professional reason. I do have some personal reasons for applying for the optional remote position. I had a baby in June. I have a 3-year-old at home who has asthma and is high risk. And because of those things, I thought this would be a good fit for me. And I do believe that lens that I have on it, having a high risk child, being a nervous mom, lends myself to some empathy with some of those parents that have made that decision for their family as well. I understand where they're coming from. This is not why all of the students are remote. That's why some of my families are remote. They are high risk pregnancies. I have 4 moms right now who are about to pop out a baby in a pandemic. And I'm like, ooh, girl, been there. I've got high risk students, high risk family members, high risk caregivers. So I do believe that has kind of actually enhanced my ability to empathize and understand with what some of the families are going through. I was asked to kind of share my lens today on the ORL side of things. And this is only what I've experienced in my first grade classroom. So I don't want to be like spokesperson of ORL, that stresses me out. But in my classroom, there have been challenges, there have been successes. Starting with some of the challenges is parent availability. I am on Zoom for 6 hours a day, and I am in families' living rooms with them. And I candidly find that to be kind of an honor. It does not really stress me out that parents and family members listen to me during the day, because I don't really get bothered by that. I'm kind of an easy breezy, come and listen if you will kind of teacher, but I am available to them. So there has been unmuting and like, hey, did she turn this in? Hey, did he get that done? And it took me a minute, like that I was not ready for. And I had to kind of get my scripted line of like, thank you for asking, let's find a better time to look at that together down. Because for a couple weeks I was like, I don't know, let me check. And then it was like, no, that's not what we're doing right now. So that was definitely a curveball. Attendance has been definitely, like in school, they're either there or they're not there. On Zoom, they're there and then they're gone and then they're back. And then you see their couch and you're calling their name and they're gone for 2 hours. And that's not all of my students, but it is a few of them. And that has been a challenge. I've had to work with the principals of their building. I've had to communicate with their family members to say, like, I don't know at what point this is truant, at what point they're not getting anything from the day because they're not with me. That's been a big challenge. I would like to point out my work hours. This is by far the hardest I've worked in 9 years of teaching, my longest hours. And as I wrote that down, I made a bullet point of that. I do want to say that I don't feel that I am working longer hours than the people who are working in the building. And I'm not sure that that's a fair statement to make. I work nights and weekends, but I work with an incredible first grade team. Shout out to She's First Grade, like best team ever. And they work just as hard as I do. So I feel like I would be doing a huge service to them if I stood up here and preached that I was working longer hours than they were. It's different. So if I, pull 6 kids to test sight words with them and I'm in person, I'm getting that data right then and there. If I assign sight words, I have to stay up at night and listen to them read the sight words. So it's different use of time. And I want to point that out, but it's, not apples to apples is that comparison. And then, there are things outside my control. Some of my kids are home with grandparents, people who have never used an iPad before, and some not so tech savvy people. So we are figuring that out. And it's a challenge. I would be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge. Getting logged into everything the first 2 weeks was like exhausting and hard and stressful, and not just for me, for everybody who is doing it at home. But I have to be honest, and when I'm sharing my experience, I have to share the successes, and I have found a lot of success with optional remote. I have to say my relationship
I think that's a challenge.
Sadie,
am
are
in
you
there.
still there? There she is.
No. Oh no, I'm sorry. Did you not hear me?
You started to share your successes and then you cut off.
Well, that's not a good sign. Okay, am I back now? I'm back. This would fall under the challenges category. If you can hear me, I will continue. I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah. We can hear you.
Okay,
Can
great.
you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Everybody's frozen, but I can hear you. So this, challenge. Internet. But as I was saying, sorry, my successes would be the families that I know. I've always prided myself. One of the biggest strengths I've had as an educator is the relationships I build with my students. And I actually still feel that. I was really worried about not having a tie to these kids, not feeling like I knew them. And I would almost argue that I know them better. I know their families, I know their situation, because good or bad, I'm in their home with them. And I also am really happy and pleasantly surprised with the engagement and participation that I've been getting. But I also want to look at the data that I've gotten. We've had 2 assignments, 2 post-assessments in math. My pre-assessment was 51% and it jumped up to a 91%. Every single one of my students grew. My pre-assessment number 2 started at a 78 and jumped up to a 90. Every single student grew with the exception of 1. At the beginning of the year, I tested the kindergarten sight words and I had 12 that had mastered those sight words. I currently have every single one of my students mastering kindergarten sight words. and I've tested 8. I would like to say I've tested everybody, but I've only gone through 8. And of those 8, everyone has mastered Unit 1 sight words. I also have almost everybody mastering their short vowels, which is the end of our Q1 goal. So I feel like there have been challenges, there have been successes. The data points to some of those successes, and it was making me feel very proud.
Okay, thank you. Micah Colgrove?
Thank you.
Hi.
Sadie, they may want to ask questions, so stick around. So Micah?
Hello. This is my 12th year at Prairie Creek. This is my first year of optional remote learning. It wasn't necessarily something I had planned on doing, but it's definitely a challenge that I've taken on. I agree with Sadie in so many ways of the challenges and successes that we see. Every day is kind of a new day. You never know what you're gonna zoom in on, but every day is a new day. Some of our challenges that we've noticed was academic time. It seemed to take sometimes 2 to 3 times as long to get some of the curricular activities completed or taught as it did when I was face-to-face. Oftentimes, this can be because of technology issues, behavior management, and also I've noticed that it's kind of hard to provide that live feedback. Oftentimes when I'm working on math problems with my students remotely, we work it out, but then they don't show me until the problem's already been worked out on their marker board. Whereas if I were in the classroom at teacher table, I would be able to work with them through that process and kind of see mistakes as we go and kind of give that live feedback. Whereas digital, it's kind of more at the end, and then we kind of work back and figure out how to make it work. With student engagement, teachers are performers and every lesson is a new show. And it is really important to do that in a Zoom call. It is so important to keep your students actively engaged, and it's exhausting. I know that my coworkers in the building are working just as hard and performing just like me, but it's definitely a challenge to make sure that all types of learners are able to be engaged and are actively participating throughout our lessons. Relationships with students, I as well kind of worried about that a little bit. I've noticed that it seems to take a little bit longer to build some of those relationships with some of those shy or reluctant students. You definitely have to kind of pull it out of them a lot more. As an ORL teacher, I feel like you have to be a lot more mindful to really set aside specific time to give kids those particular peer interactions. So it definitely kind of cuts into that, but it's definitely useful time. But I know that ORL teachers have to be really mindful and make sure and provide those opportunities for peer-to-peer interaction. So that's kind of been an extra challenge that we're really trying to make sure we provide for students. Our plan and work time, and this kind of goes for all teachers in general, teachers are always doing all that they can do to help students succeed. Teaching remotely is no different. Oftentimes though, remote teachers are having to change the format of our resources that we've had on hand or that, teach specific skills. But we're having to change the format to make sure that our digital students can access those and also work with those. So there's a little bit of that time involved with that. I got the opportunity to stay at home a couple of days with my kids. They were hybrid, and so they were online learners for a few days. And it was so interesting to see that parent perspective of being on the other side of Zoom and watching a teacher teach remote. As a parent, just seeing it, I can see the amount of time that it took as a parent and the amount of effort that I spent that day making sure my kids were engaged. Sit up, make sure you're listening to your teacher. So I definitely can see the amount of support and time it's taking on our parents. And thank you all of those parents out there that are doing that each time. We really appreciate it. For classroom management, one thing I've noticed with teaching remotely is when you're in the classroom, there's all these techniques at your disposal. You can do nonverbal cues. You can look at a student from across the room, give them those teacher eyes, and they know that you're looking at them. It's a little harder to do that in Zoom. They all think that you're doing it at them. So some kids that maybe you're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, oh, I got the teacher eyes. Oh no. It's just harder to convey sometimes. So in a remote learning environment, we're challenged with new behaviors and we're constantly having to problem solve how to fix that, how to overcome that, how to promote those positive behaviors. We see all sorts of stuff that go on in homes. I've had siblings fighting. I've had to make sure little brothers are either getting out of the room or that they're in a safe environment. I see pets, all sorts of pets all the time. I see all sorts of animals and distractions. So like I said, it's just new problems and solutions that we're constantly trying to figure out what's the best way to handle situations. But I will say we are teachers. We adapt. We work hard. We want the best for each child. And we will do what we can do to help each child succeed. And that does not change whether they are in our building or they are at home. We are working hard. We are doing all that we can. And we will continue to keep doing all of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Sadie and Micah, and I have you guys keep around. A few things I'm going to add and then ask whatever questions you have. I think the first thing, though, is when we changed the gating criteria, we made it available that students who in secondary were not originally in optional remote learning could go back. And when we did that, there were classes that those students are taking that were not offered on optional remote. So we had to do one of a few things. One is they could drop the class and take a different class. But when you're in the high school, you've got a vested amount of time into that class. There's also classes called singletons that are only offered one time. And so when that class is offered only one time, then there's not the ability to try to figure out a way for that teacher to teach it at a different time. And so what happens is the parents now have the choice to make. Do they send their child back to the class for that one or two classes that are the singletons that are not offered, or they end up Zooming in, which puts pressure on teachers that now they're teaching a class full of kids, and now they've got kids on Zoom as well. And these are teachers that did not ask to do the Zoom classes. So we put pressure on those teachers, whereas we asked for volunteers in the first round, and some of the, what do you call it when you voluntwist their arm? So you
Voluntold.
Voluntold. So some of our teachers were voluntold, but when we did the ORL comeback, we voluntold a lot of teachers so that we put some additional pressure on them. So again, that's one of those situations where you either say to parents, you're going to come back into an environment that you're choosing not to want to come back into, so your child has the best opportunity, or you're going to Zoom in knowing that the teacher has a class full of kids and is going to be focusing on that group of kids. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing is at semester, when we change over, we know that there's kids that are coming back. I've talked to at least 16 parents that represent more than 16 kids at the elementary level, and as we said earlier, the secondary has kids that want to come back too. When those kids come back, they're going to go into the classrooms, which we're expecting, but depending on the numbers, we're going to have to pull some of those optional remote learning teachers back as well to make sure that class sizes are reasonable. So that means the optional remote classes will probably go up, or we're going to have to do bands where maybe like somebody like Mrs. Clements, who's doing an outstanding job with first grade, she may have to take on kindergartners and first graders. So again, not the best environment. The thing that we did ask is at semester, we did talk to Insight and Kansas Virtual Academy and asked them if they would take, if we made a change here, would they take those kids from the Spring Hill district? And then they said that they would. And so they would be having an option. We wouldn't just say, your now optional remote is no longer, and now you've got fully in or nothing. So that would be there. But the last thing I want to throw out is the voluntold part. You know, we're fortunate we have some teachers that, like Mike and Sadie, they both said they're going to do whatever it takes to make it work. That's an incredible amount of stress on them as well. And when we hired them to be in-class teachers. And they have done a phenomenal job, and the optional remote teachers have done a phenomenal job. This is not a criticism of them. But we are also hearing about stresses and the fact that, you know, one of the things that they said is right now when you're teaching in class, you may not have 20 parents in there watching you teach. When you're optional remote, you may have teachers not only watching you teach, but asking you questions and doing that. The teachers, again, are doing a phenomenal job, but that's an additional stress as well. So with that being said, we're going to open it up for questions, but these are concerns that have been coming up, and we needed to visit with you sooner rather than later. So you've got the two teachers on Zoom, and then we've got the people that presented. So who would you like to ask questions of?
I guess I would just throw out a question, maybe start with Dr. Burke. Have you been hearing anything that we need to change, or does it just take a little more time to settle in, or is there something we need to do different, or what's there a
I
common
think the
theme?
teachers have adjusted and done the best job that they can with they have. You know, a lot depends. I mean, you're talking kindergartners all the way through seniors. And so a lot depends on the teacher and a lot depends on the situation. I think they're doing a great job. I'm just hearing the stress. And again, I'm not saying that the teachers in class don't have stress as well. As you heard Sadie say, they're working long hours as well. I think the difference is the people that are in person with that's kind of what they signed up for. The people that did optional remote, some of them volunteered, and some of them had principals saying, hey, we really need you to think about doing this. So
Yeah,
I don't know that there's any one-size-fits-all type thing that they can do, but I think they made adjustments. I think the parents are very appreciative. There's many parents in optional remote that have honored their contract. They said that they would have an adult there. They're working with their kids. They're doing a phenomenal job. At the same time, we're hearing even from some parents about disruptions, some kids that are on there that maybe don't have the parent support or are on there alone or just kind of disappear, or, you know, just like a regular ed class, one or two kids taking an incredible amount of time, of the teacher's time. But again, that's, I don't know that I have a firm answer for you, Mr. Anderson, but this is not a criticism of our staff at all. But again, this is new times and new adjustments, and this is something that we said that we would visit with you about.
And of course, the teachers in the classroom got the added stress of mass police and cleaning and all that kind of stuff too. So it's a stressful time for everybody, for sure.
I just had one clarification with Ms. Colgrove. What grade level was she teaching? Third grade?
Micah, you want to answer that?
Currently, right now, I am teaching third and fourth. I'm one of the co-teaching ORL teachers. So I work with the third grade and the fourth grade students.
Okay. This really isn't a question, it's kind of a comment, but, because my daughter's doing this optional remote in another district, and she has third and fourth grade as well, and I'm hearing some of the same things that I hear from her kind of on a daily basis, like just the exhaustion of just like, you're performing in front of the screen like all day long, and then, you know, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? What happened to Johnny? He's not there anymore, or whatever, you know. So I think it is really challenging, but I do commend you guys for volunteering to do some of these, because, you know, it's kind of charting new waters, and it's definitely not ideal, but I appreciate you making the most of it, and I think it sounds like our administration is going to come up with some good options for moving forward after this whole period. So thanks.
So Dr. Burke, just to clarify, well, first let me say, I think it's always it's very valuable to hear from Sadie and Micah and Jody and all. Hearing your firsthand perspective means so much. And so I'll say just thank you to all of the teachers, whether in class or not. I know how this has to be nearly impossible, but you're making it work because you guys do a great job. So I just want to say thank you. But Dr. Burke, I wanted to clarify. I think what I'm hearing you say is that from the teachers' feedback through their principals and also the ones we've heard from, that optional remote learning, we're going to continue that. We're not saying we're going to stop it right now. We've made a semester-long commitment right through December. But then we're going to take a relook at it for second semester. Is that what am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. We will finish optional remote learning through the full first semester. We will look at some surveys to some parents, but we really want to talk to our staff and our administrators as well before anything's sent out.
And
So, no, optional remote learning will not change before the semester's over.
Okay. And then if it were to change, then, and I know Cassie's on here too, but Insight and K-12 would be able to take on those students as well. So the parents would still have the choice to do online learning. It just might not be through our district, USD230, it would be through Insight. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Insight and KVA don't normally take students at semester, so they would be doing it for us.
Okay, that's really nice. Well, thank you. I just think it's important. I think we've said over and over again, we want to be sure the parents have choice, and that's still their choice. I guess my other follow-up question, maybe this is some feedback, but for the teachers that had chosen optional remote learning, have you heard any feedback from them on anybody not wanting to come back, or how are they feeling about that?
Have to be very careful about that we don't break confidentiality. But I do know that Michelle Hackney has done a great job of working with them and providing options for any certified staff that had concerns about coming back to in-person teaching.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Because when you say that you're done with this, all these people out there get to go home.
I have no more questions. I really appreciate everybody working hard to make this work. It was a tough situation.
Yeah, I really appreciate teachers and all the staff that's doing all this hard work. I know it's really, really difficult to do just in-person teaching, let alone try to do in-person and virtual or just virtual. It's just a crazy amount of work. So I really appreciate everybody.
Just say one thing. I think what is so important and so critical that we really celebrate and acknowledge is that not only are our teachers, administration, staff stepping up, because they've had the way they conduct their professional lives completely changed in the last 6 months. And what I think we all need to understand and acknowledge is the example that they are teaching our students, our parents, and community members about resiliency. This is about their behavior. You can see it, you can hear it in their voice, you can see it or feel it in the passion that they speak from. But what a fantastic mentoring example that we have in our teachers and administrators and staff to our students, to teach them to be agile, to teach them to be resilient, to teach them to open your mind to alternative ways and new ways of doing things, especially when you're thrown into this by something completely outside of your control. I just think it's such an amazing example of our educators within our district, that they can teach our children and our students through example and their behavior. It's not just words. I think sometimes those lessons that students learn from that are probably more life-changing and more permanent than something that they just maybe hear from a voice or read in a book. So I have just a tremendous respect and appreciation for all of the hard work, time, energy, and effort that staff, students, teachers, administrators, everyone within our district have put into this. It's truly remarkable. So thank you very much. We certainly appreciate that. Any other comments or discussion? Very good. And thank you for joining in via Zoom. It looked like some of you are still in your classrooms, and I know that's got to be a challenge. So thank you. So moving on to items from Board of Education members for future meetings. Any additions to our current list?
Not sure this is, this needs to be on the list, but, I was wondering if we could get a status update sometime on our reporting and dashboards through Forecast 5 analytics at some point soon.
Yeah, so we can add that to the list. I think it's just as a reminder.
Yep.
And we can take off the tour, obviously.
Pardon?
We can take off the tour.
Oh, yeah,
We did that.
right, no.
I see board retreat date. We've got the date set, but we probably ought to think about talking about the agenda or something.
I think we definitely,
One of these coming up.
it's a good point. So, board retreat agenda.
Candy, you want to add that to, probably not the next meeting, because it's normally a morning meeting, but we'll add it to the November agenda.
The other thing that fell off of this list, about this time last year, we were talking about student representatives. Do you want me to put that?
Student what?
Representatives, the board? Do
Oh,
you want me to put that back on the list? You just want to let that float for a little bit until,
Let's pick, I'd
COVID's
like to
under
pick that
control?
back up in the second semester, maybe.
I started to say, we need to get the kids back before you start trying to do that.
okay?
we should put it on the list as a reminder.
That's what I'm thinking,
Like
just
that,
so.
I'll have it on the list
but-
as kind of a long-term goal,
Yeah.
so we don't lose it. But
Any other additions?
Give a quick, Mrs. Mitchell wanted to know overall impact of COVID on finance. I think Doug has turned in some numbers to Miami and Johnson County, and we're at about 600 grand right now.
We got reimbursed already about 210,000 from Johnson County and almost 190 from Miami County. Right now, that's the maximum we can get back. Miami County's pretty much said that's all we're gonna get, but Johnson County's kind of alluded that there may be some more money down the road. So we're gonna keep an eye on that. Now, federal money, which we haven't, we have that available to draw down, is about another 160,000. So altogether, yeah, you're talking about 600,000 total between the three different sources.
And we're probably on track to add another 400,000 before the year's over, so it's probably gonna cost us about $1 million. And we're lucky, Doug, if we get $500,000 back.
Well, we'll get 600,000. I'm hoping there'll be a little bit more come in, but yeah, I think your target of about $1 million for the year is gonna be real close. So we could be out about 400,000 when it's all said and done.
We'll give you a more specific update, but I just know those numbers came across my desk recently because we've had to be making, Johnson County and Miami County, we've had to turn in numbers recently to them.
So, are those costs due to equipment or personnel?
Yes. We've had a lot of equipment, PPE, but we've had to add, personnel specifically because of COVID.
Sure.
And we may have to, like, one of the things we may have to do is like with these Zoom meetings with large classes, or I'm sorry, but you have an in-person class, but then you have one or two Zoom. It's not gonna be possible for a teacher to be working with a large class and work with one or two. So we may have to hire somebody to go in to do that and work them around all day. So, you know, those are additional costs. You know, when we have the people that was, you know, helping make sure the kids are social distancing and some additional support with not just the social distancing, but the cleaning and not bunching up and things like that. That staff, but we've had specifically had to hire some special education staff just because of COVID. If we weren't in COVID, we wouldn't have hired them this year. So to answer your question,
Yes.
Winbo, the answer is yes,
Yeah.
both of those.
I'm just, the reason I ask is, just want to try to use our capital outlay money to try to maybe reimburse some of those over the course of the next few years, like we amortize those expenses out and recoup that. Is that possible?
Not necessarily salary. There's some pretty strict
Right.
restrictions as
But
far
like
as capital.
PPE equipment and things like that, or that are like true equipment type stuff?
Yeah, true equipment, we can go ahead and purchase out of capital outlay and draw that cash balance down. Obviously, we're not buying it on credit or anything.
Right.
We're buying everything up front with cash. So, it's possible we pull down our cash balances a little bit further than we'd like to this year. But obviously try to get those built up as quickly as possible down the road.
Do you have a sense of, kind of a percentage of if that's really due to, because a lot of, I guess what I'm getting at is a lot of these expenses were incurred whether the kids are in the building or not. Is that correct? I mean, because you were still cleaning and everything during the school year and some of the staff. It's like if all the students were remote, we'd still have incurred a lot of expenses, I guess is what I'm asking.
We've tried to separate those. So what I've turned into Miami and Johnson County is truly, we would not had to have purchased it had it not been for COVID.
I started saying.
Right, but I was talking about what mode of learning doesn't really matter. Like you don't just save a bunch of money if you're in hybrid or something like that. Or would you incur more expenses? If
Well,
you're-
I'll give you an example of some incurred expenses that maybe we didn't think about. So when we were in remote learning for the secondary, you think that you can save some money from busing, right? But when we decided to add activities, there's kids who ride the bus, and that's the only way they get to school. So we were actually running routes for them to get them to school, but that's just a half route, so you think you'd save a little bit of money. But when the hybrid right now, we're actually running 3 routes instead of 2. So picking up the kids in the morning that are the A kids, then in the afternoon, you pick up the B kids who ride the bus that aren't there, and then and you drop them off, and then you turn around and drive them back, the A kids. So now you're running 3 routes. That extra route that you're running in there is purely COVID. We would not be running that extra route if we weren't doing the activities and it weren't part of COVID. But what Doug is saying is, part of the requirements is they want us to separate what we specifically hired or equipment that we bought just because of COVID. Phil did a great job of showing you those stand-up temperature checks. And Phil, I don't remember, what were those, $2,000 a piece? And we bought 10 of them, 8 of them. Let's say, for argument's sake, let's say that we bought 1 for each building. That is purely a cost that had nothing to do with anything with COVID. We would not have bought those. You know, we bought those plexiglass, separators. That's $50,000 to $70,000 that we spent. Only bought that because of COVID. We wouldn't have bought that separately.
And I wasn't asking like if things were not COVID related. I was asking more like it doesn't matter whether you're trying to do remote learning or hybrid or in person, you're still incurring expenses no matter how you do it.
Yeah, another example of that would be, and Phil could probably give you a better idea, but the amount of money we spent on new instructional resources for technology to be able to be used in optional remote learning, or in the case that we might have to go to remote, whether it be elementary or secondary.
So to answer your question, yes, there's some expenses that we would not have incurred if we weren't in remote or optional remote. So, there may have been some, you're right, we're gonna clean either way, but there's some types of cleaning that we're doing only because of COVID.
Right,
And there's
right.
pieces of equipment that we bought only because of COVID.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
I would say the remote and optional remote, there is, software that we bought only because of that. We bought additional computers only because of that.
And then just my other comment or question, when I asked this, to put on the list, it wasn't, I guess I wasn't thinking about that aspect of it. I was thinking more like for next year in the legislature and how much money there is to work with, what is gonna be the impact economically for the state of Kansas, the federal government on the financing of education because of COVID. So it's another facet of the financial part, but it's kind of the bigger looming question, and when might we even have an indication of that?
Sharon, you're making Doug quiver and shake over here. He's about to fall out of his chair.
You know, one of the things that makes every superintendent nervous is the governor has been very good to say, I'm not gonna cut funding. And she continues to say that until the day that she doesn't say that anymore. So to answer your question, we hope that she will continue to provide that support that she says she will.
And you gotta keep in mind, we get paid based on the number of kids we have. Doesn't matter what instruction we provide, it's kids. And so this year, I remember looking at a report from RSP, we were predicting about 260 more kids this year. Today, all the principals' building reports are pretty much ready to go, and it's more like 60 kids. So we dropped 200 from what we were thinking we would get. 200 times 5,000 a kid on average, it's $1 million we're gonna lose next year because of the lag. Next year could be scary unless something happens between now and then, which is possible. We're not alone though. I talked to Gardner, they're down 300. DeSoto, I think, is down 300. Everybody around us lost kids.
Latha's between 500 and 700, so.
Is that just people going to homeschool and virtual learning?
Our virtual school enrollment nearly doubled. They had a little over 1,000 head count last year, and it's over 2,000, I think, this year. So
I can tell you one thing that's a little strange, and I'm hearing superintendents, not just in Johnson County, but across the state, talk about this. So we've been able to figure out who went to virtual school. We also have a pretty good grasp of who went to homeschool. We also pretty good idea of the amount of kids that went to private schools. But we have probably 50 to 60 kids that we don't know where they went. We're a small district. Talking to some of the larger districts next to us, they're talking about hundreds. And so again, the assumption is that these people are being homeschooled, but
That was one of the big things that reading some of those national school board memos and stuff that we get, that in the inner cities, even in the spring, they just lost track of lots and lots of kids, so.
Yeah, there's some of the KSB regional roundtables that I've been on. There have been some questions about doing another count in the spring, whether it be January, February, just to see who comes back from homeschooling into the building, who comes back from virtual learning into the building, you know, those types of things that we don't have necessarily control over. And then, so maybe getting that extra count during the school year might help us for the funding for next year. And that's just somebody asking some speculation of trying to get that done, and KSB is, I think it's gonna put it on its list to at least advocate for that.
superintendents have asked for a second count date statewide.
We're just losing kids, or we just didn't grow by very many?
We grew overall, but we expected to grow probably 250 to 275, and we grew about 50 to 75.
I guess people were just hunkering down and staying in the current situation and not moving.
Yeah. We have it's not a great situation, but we grew. I can tell you districts all around us, and I mean, I'm talking about here, did not grow. So
the one maybe topic with the legislature is gonna be trying to get that funding for the current year changed instead of having it go for the previous year like it has been. Because some of these districts that lost, enrollments aren't gonna be advocating for that because it's gonna help them the next year. So
One year, but not, then
Yeah.
it'll catch up.
it's gonna catch up.
Anything else for items from Board of Education members for future meetings? Okay, moving on to board work calendar.
We're right where we should be. So this is October, and we're right where we should be.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to committee reports. Reports from committees we've attended.
Wolf Creek had a, site council last week, but I was out of town. I gotta check in on that yet, and I'll bring something back. I believe I'm on high school site council, but I haven't seen anything about any meetings or anything, so.
Which one?
High school, I believe.
I haven't seen anything on site council either. I couldn't tell you.
Candy, you have that list of, which board members are on which site council?
Yeah, it's on the organizational meeting that I can notify the schools, so you have information.
Oh.
Okay. I will notify you.
Yep.
I have a site council with Insight tomorrow.
I mean, I'm fine if they're not having them, I just don't wanna be missing things and haven't noticed them.
I saw something that came through an email for the high school site council, because I get some of them. But I'll look into,
I just
why-
checked all my
I'll
emails.
confirm with all of the
Today.
administrators that they're sending out notices.
Very good.
I
I
already
haven't heard from Timber Sage yet, but hopefully I didn't miss it. She's had theirs last week, and I was at a hospital meeting. It was at 4 o'clock, but I will follow up with them and report back on that as well.
I already had one with Spring Hill Middle School.
Any other committee reports?
Yeah, if you guys haven't attended the KASB regional roundtables, the last one is on Wednesday. We talk about, constitutional amendments to, KASB's constitution regarding, president terms, emeritus, and some other changes. We're also talking about legislative items that KASB will advocate on behalf of us, and do some breakout sessions. One of the things that I'm doing for them is help moderating those breakout sessions for them. And then also, again, they play the video for the president-elect designee nomination, so that my video's on there as well. And so, technically, the Region 1, which is what we're in, is on Wednesday, so you'll see a lot of the districts from around here, including Olathe, Blue Valley, Leavenworth, so on. So they'll be on.
Anybody can tie into that?
Yeah, it's free. Anybody can sign in. You have to register through KSB, and Kitty may be able to help with that as well.
We have an email.
Probably do.
And it's at 6 p.m.
I get
on
lots
Wednesday.
of them, so not sure which one. Get lots of them every day.
Any other committee reports? Superintendent report, Dr. Burke.
I think you've heard me talk plenty tonight, so we'll.
We do need a couple of executive sessions.
Mr. President, I move that the board recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual under coma. Those to be in session include the Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and administrators as requested. The executive session to begin at 8:50. Give you some time, and be back here no later than 9:10.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to move to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel under coma. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, I'm going to open, the executive session breakout room for those that are remote, and I'll put you guys in that, and so that you can communicate with them, but that'll make sure that we don't send anything out over, so.
Alrighty.
Back in session.
He's coming.
Are we unmuted on the, Zoom?
Yeah, you're good.
Thanks.
Yeah, let's only make new mistakes. How's that?
That's right. You ready, Candy? Mr. President, I move that the board approve the contract with 191st Street Investors for the acquisition of property at 191st Street and Ridgeview.
Second the motion.
It's moved in second to approve the contract with 191st Street Investors to purchase property at 191st Street and roughly Ridgeview. Any questions, discussion, comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
Start the vote with Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
approved.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second, this is Ally.
Moved in second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Time for drinks. Oh.